everyone. Welcome to Empowering Exceptional Minds, the podcast diving into neurodiversity through real conversations with parents, individuals, and professionals on challenges, strengths, and unique experiences. I'm your host, Maayan Glazer-Koren, an educational therapist, ADHD educator, and ASD specialist. At Educational Therapy LLC, my private practice, we support kids and adults with executive function and learning differences toward confidence and independence. This podcast is a collaboration with Wiz Therapy, connecting individuals to providers and streamlining services for neurodiverse communities. Our goal is to share strategies, stories, and insights to empower families, educators, and professionals. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of this podcast or Wiz Therapy. The conversations here are for information and empowerment, not a substitute for professional or medical advice. And most importantly, if you are experiencing a mental health emergency, please dial 911 immediately, or you can text 741-741 to reach the crisis text line in the US for support. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Empowering Exceptional Minds. Today, I am super excited to have Dr. John Severino with us. He is actually has tons of experience in leadership and management. He's the CFO at Carefree Revenue Cycle Management, a medical billing company, and he also started myadultadhdcoach.com to help adults with ADHD get through life easier. On top of that, I just kind of dig that, I was just going into your LinkedIn and I was like, oh my gosh, you are a musician. John also plays the drums. This is so cool. He's been playing since he was 9 years old. I want to hear about that. And he even started a Catholic ADHD coach on Facebook, right? To share your passion for helping people with ADHD live their best lives. So today we are actually going to talk about your journey, right? And through business, coaching, music, we have to talk about music, and share some tips on leadership and ADHD support, especially in the workplace. John, welcome aboard.
Thank you so much, Maayan. I'm very excited to be here myself to share my story, the journey, the workplace experience, and talk about leadership through those roles as well.
Yeah, so take us through your path. How did you start all of this?
Well, it's funny you mentioned me being a musician, and I think I always knew I wanted to play the drums from a very early age. My parents tried to start me on guitar when I was 9, and it lasted for 2 weeks. My fingers hurt. I threw the guitar out the window, and that's a very ADHD thing, by the way. To have that type of visceral reaction at a young age. But eventually we switched over to drums, and that was what captivated me and kept me moving forward. It was a great motivation, and it helped the hyperactivity quite a bit. Although at the time we had no idea about hyperactivity or ADD in my life till much later. But I think that's what helped me to get through my youth. That and I'm an Eagle Scout. I was in Boy Scouts, and I learned a lot of leadership that I absolutely still use today by being a leader in Boy Scouts.
That's amazing. Look at you. You have so many things to do.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it was the principles that are taught are all about leadership management. Most Boy Scout troops are boy-led, and so you learn to develop working with teams, addressing resources, learning to prioritize, when you need to set up a camp correctly and have time goals that you have to get to different places, and then there's going to be inspections. Those are all skills that I've used to allow myself to have a career and in business. Through my career in business, I've been able to grow. And starting like a lot of people, I started in sales in the mortgage world, and eventually grew through that and learned how to run a company. by using those skills, working with others, and always being open to learning something new. In the mid-40s, I was officially diagnosed with ADHD. Um, I was I was actually part of a random study when I
Hmm.
was 10 years old, done at a large institute here in Southern California. And so ADD was introduced as a word in my life, but again, there was very little meaning in the 70s.
Right.
Along the way, and after understanding my absolute diagnosis and learning all about ADHD, I felt compelled to want to share my journey, but also to really understand how it affects adults, and especially in the workplace. Um, in my studies, I came to understand that there is, of course, the legal aspect of wellness in the employment universe, which is in America with the ADA rules, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the amendments that came under the administration of the presidency of Obama.
Hmm.
And so there is a compelling reason for companies to understand ADHD, since it does follow under the laws of the ADA, which do require for companies to have reasonable accommodations for persons who have mental disorders, along with, of course, physically handicapped persons. And so some companies have adopted a wellness thought and some have not. But I also come at it from how can I take my experience and help people with ADHD not only ask for accommodation and get through their employment life, but also how to deal with it in the workplace so that when they're asking for an accommodation, reasonable is the key word there, they also understand what accommodation is most likely to make them more productive and more effective. And that way, when they go to their employer, they can be great self-advocates. And that's where my story lands. Right now, I like to spend as much time as possible helping people to understand how to self-advocate in a somewhat hostile environment sometimes.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, human resources doesn't always want to deal with accommodating people with ADHD, and it mostly is just a lack of understanding. In the end,
Hmm.
it's a great benefit to them because employee retention is quite costly. So
Yeah.
replacement is difficult.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that's my journey, kind of where I am to today. There's a million and a half stories in between there. And then there's the constant learning. I just watched a wonderful video by Dr. Dodson on rejection sensitivity
Oh
dysphoria.
yeah. Hmm.
And it's the little secret that we all know that explains so much that we never talk about
Yeah.
because it is so personal. But honestly, that is where the that's where your ADHD can become so effective on you, right? Because if you learn to fear rejection, then when the boss sends you an email and says, I'd love to talk to you, your immediate thought is, oh my God, I'm going to get fired,
Yeah.
right? And you go into the office with trepidation and you sit down and you're ready for it. And they say, oh, by the way, that was a pretty good job you did on the other thing. Would you like to go to lunch with us today? Only to go to lunch and sit there and go, I don't belong here. I don't belong here. I don't belong here. but you did the work and you do belong there. So part of ADHD is also learning to give ourselves pats on the back.
Yeah.
And so I love to think about that, bring that to people. I think that's good news. I think helping people to understand that they have earned their position. Um, it is Dr. John Severino. I earned my PsyD in 2023, and that was quite the journey. The idea of obtaining a doctorate when you have ADHD sometimes seems impossible to understand or think about. Um, I did attempt college right out of high school. I was trying to be a musician. I was doing studies in music. So I was a percussion performance major, music
Mm.
major.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of those very useful degrees. It was useful in that the networking was good. However, I did not finish. And of course, with ADHD, we all have so many stories where we didn't finish.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as I said, I was in the mortgage business. And when the 2008 crisis occurred, I had some time while
Mm-hmm.
in between cycles in jobs because mortgage companies were closing quickly. And once
Yeah.
the recovery started, we got back to it. But there was some time off there. And I was contacted by a university that was associated with a physical school, but also did online courses. And those courses were 9 weeks at a time, one course at a time. Yeah, went to school all year long, and I got so much out of it. I finished my undergrad uh, in psychology with a psychology major, and then went ahead and pursued my master's with a psychology major with an emphasis in life coaching
Mm.
and uh, organization, uh, workplace organization. And then I decided while I was at my master's graduation, looking at the dissertations that were presented for the doctorates that were graduating, I came up with a dissertation in my mind. And I was like, well, then I might as well pursue getting my PsyD. I got this far.
Yeah.
And I kept going. And eventually, and I mean a long eventually, it turned into a PsyD because what they did inform us is once you get to the dissertation stage, we're basically going to launch you off, or the best described the way they described it, which was up until now, as you come to the river, we always have given you a path.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're at the river and you have no path.
Swim yourself.
Wow, that's a scary thing for somebody with ADHD
Yeah.
for sure.
You need structure.
Structure was helpful. Having a great dissertation committee chairperson who was willing to work with me and had his own success program was great. He's the person self-described as the mechanic. When they need to, they don't want the schools don't want their numbers to drop by people not finishing the program.
Right.
So they would bring this person in to be a committee chairperson and replace the chairperson that the person was working with if they needed to move along.
Funny.
And he helped. He had a program. Every 2 weeks, we got on a meeting with each other and we were able to discuss exactly where we were. And there was always the expectation of the next meeting that there would be things that we wanted to achieve. So there was always accountability.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And that has become a hallmark in leadership that
Mm-hmm.
I use is accountability. You did mention that I on Facebook started Catholic ADHD Coach, and this was before I had done any other coaching when I
Mm.
started the page. Uh, there has been a resurgence in interest in the page, so I think I'm going to continue contributing to it and see if I can regrow it. But there are lots of concerns. People with ADHD sometimes get concerned that their prayer is not as focused as they would like it to be, and somehow if that's a problem. And we discuss things like that. We discuss the multi-modalities of treating ADHD uh, in that scope. But the reason I bring that up is because eventually you want to start to define your leadership type or process. And I could think of no better leader than the demonstration that Jesus Christ gave us in leadership. And so I try and emulate as much as I can in leadership some of the tenets and values that we learn through faith. And of course, it's a very loving place. Mm-hmm. Right? There's discipline there. There's the idea that things are done in a particular order and need to be done sometimes in a particular way. However, how much grace and love is there in doing it, which is the very opposite sometimes of what we find in the corporate world, where it's very sanitized and there isn't that type of love genuinely. So I'm not hoping that I'm going to walk through corporations one day and everybody's going to be just throwing flowers.
No, that's not going to help. That's not going to happen, I guess.
However, I think if you take personal responsibility, you can always set yourself as a more patient and forward-thinking manager or leader. And I think that's very important. I think it helps individuals grow. And after all, if you're in a corporation and you're going to pay the money to have people do the work with you and for you, you absolutely can benefit if they're operating at their most efficient. And I believe that people are more efficient when they are coming from a space of desire and happiness than if they're coming from a place of doing it because the only motivation they have is that boss who's pushing their thumb down on them and constantly on the edge of fearing of being fired.
Yeah. I do want to talk a little bit about adults in the workplace. And because of your also background in that, I find it really interesting that recently, in the recent years, I mean, you mentioned that yourself, like being diagnosed later in your life was kind of opening the door for more understanding of what was part of the ADHD in the workplace. So what are the most common challenges that you notice with adults with ADHD face at work? Even if it's just like prioritization, right? Sometimes it's really overwhelming. And I want us to talk before it becomes to a burnout. What can they kind of maybe see the signs that the burnout is about to happen?
Yeah, so personal awareness, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're diagnosed later with ADHD, it will answer some questions, but it's also going to bring some burdens with it. I think everybody who's diagnosed as an adult and not as a child, but as an adult strictly, of course, they managed ADHD all of their life to that point, because we know ADHD doesn't suddenly have adult onset unless there's brain trauma. Mm-hmm. So it's from birth, and you've managed it all your life, and now you have a name for some of the things, but it can be a big upheaval in your life. And so some of the common traits of ADHD we understand because just of the name, right? We've understood that there's impulsivity, which is not necessarily a great workplace trait, right? Because things in work generally happen linearly and we're more free thinking. And sometimes we have to rein that in or figure out how to take the impulsivity and turn it into something that works for us and not against us.
Yeah, that's a good point.
The other big question that happens is whether or not, now that I'm diagnosed, who do I tell or do I tell anybody?
Exactly.
And so disclosure becomes, sometimes it becomes a burden. It becomes a pretty heavy weight. And whether or not you should disclose when you're thinking about it comes down to whether or not you understand your company's wellness culture.
Mm-hmm.
Some companies, I imagine, and I know for a fact that some large companies put a great deal of desire into wanting people to feel as good as they can at work, and wellness is important in their culture. And then there are a lot of companies that are not as aware when it comes to that space. So as an employee, I do discuss, this idea of accommodation. I think that what happens is we get, as adults, sucked into these definitions that are curated for us. So ADHD is this. You go to the DSM-5 and it tells you the items that are required to diagnose you with ADHD and what your behaviors look like. And some of those things you've experienced all your life. So you agree, and everybody understands these problems. So I'm having a little frontal lobe memory capture right at the moment. And if you were my boss, you might have to take a moment, right, and try and understand the point that I'm getting to. Well, as a person who's been diagnosed with ADHD and understanding my communication issues, I also realize when this starts happening, I need to slow down and take a breath and think about what I want to say so that I can deliver properly. These are some of the things. If you're in a company that is highly structured for meetings, and there's a lot of meetings, and you find yourself having to sit and attend and actually be involved and be present in those meetings. And in my coaching, that's a lot of the discussion we have is how to be present, since ADHD kind of keeps us out of being present. We're either correcting ourselves or searching for the future. And I try and help my clients by helping them to understand how to be right in the moment so that they can listen well. The hyperactivity that I was talking about, often young boys especially who are wild like I was, as adults, we don't bring that hyperactivity physically generally into our lives. We understand at some point that we are not going to be able to be like that and say in an office environment. And a lot of times I'm dealing with people in an office environment. If you're outside, if you've got that type of job where you can always be doing something a little bit different and something new, and you're outside and there's a lot of physicality involved, like anything from construction to being a ranger, right?
Yeah.
Generally, those aren't clients in a lot of ways, unless they have internal emotional things that they're dealing with at home, etc. But in the workplace, they generally sustain well. It's when they get pulled out of the field and brought into the office, and now they have to be in an office environment, which is going to be a little bit more difficult to maintain. Then we have that opportunity to look at ourselves, self-check, really understand ADHD, which is why I love coaching, because I get to really help the person understand how ADHD manifests exactly in them.
Yeah.
Which then allows them to examine their behavior and see where they can do self-improvement towards that self-advocacy in the event that they are going to want to go to the company for an accommodation. So I think that is the best road to accommodation is first have the self-understanding to know what actually will help you. My way of looking at this sometimes or explaining this is when we talk about university accommodations.
Yeah.
It doesn't take much. I think right now with a broken cuticle, you can probably get some extra time to complete a test
Yeah.
or assignments. You can also probably get, if you're at a university where you are in a classroom and there's a lot of people or whatever, and there's going to be some sort of test or essay required in class, you can probably get the school to accommodate you to move to a quieter place to do that test, with a proxy, etc. Um, the workplace is not quite like that.
No.
There could be hundreds of different types of accommodations, but I find that many employees just automatically go to the first few that they've heard about. I need a quiet space. Well, do you?
Yeah, that's a good question. Some people don't function in a quiet space. They need more noise around them.
But if they're not aware of that, if they don't understand that kind of noise is the same as white noise
Right.
occurring
Hmm.
behind them, that maybe the pressure of being out in the social environment is also not necessarily a bad thing,
Right.
because it's often going to keep you from drifting off
Right. It keeps you accountable.
and it keeps you accountable. Right. So that might not be the accommodation you want, even though you've heard, oh, that might be the accommodation I need. Right. And then you've self-disclosed, the company has agreed, you come up, you go through all the steps. Almost every company is going to require you to have a professional note, generally a psychiatrist, psychologist, or general practitioner that agrees with your diagnosis and recommends certain accommodations. If they're not well schooled in ADHD, they might go to what they see as maybe the top 5 or 6 accommodations as recommendations. But if they don't know you as well as you know yourself, their accommodation suggestions could sink you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you really want to be able to work with them in order to help them to give the right recommendation so the company can use that information and do something that's going to help you. Sometimes it's flexible time. Now we're all far more used to working virtually. But that idea certainly was a concept that could have been used. Now, and one that I would probably ask for if I was working at a place that required that I come in at a specific time every day. And if there was room, I would probably ask for at least some flexibility on that. Um, an accommodation could be as easy as I absolutely need to have my cell phone at my desk and on, because all of my all of my survival all of my survival systems are on my phone because they originated from home. So I have my to-do task uh, managers and reminders, and I have my calendar, and I have those types of thing on my phone. And if you're in the type of office that does not want you to have your cell phone at your desk for many reasons, um, that might be an accommodation that you absolutely need and want. And I think sometimes employees start to get into this idea of accommodation, and it could be expensive, or you work out on a manufacturing floor and you do need quiet space. Well, maybe noise reducing headphones with some white noise or something in them is going to suffice, because obviously you can't do your job if you're not on that floor, right? So the whole the whole process, I believe, is about self-awareness, self-understanding, acceptance, some reasonable looks at trying things on your own, see if it does change how you're able to produce, and then you bring that to the company.
This will be turning to HR first, though, to ask how they can help with
Right,
accommodations. Yeah.
right. You absolutely will have to go to HR first to receive accommodation. I would look at the employee handbook about their wellness culture before I even said anything to anybody, so that I had a great understanding of, do they have a wellness program? Many companies do, but they outsource it.
Yeah.
So they may not even have a culture of wellness, even though they have a wellness program. So you just want to do a little bit of research into those things. Expect expect that you will be asked to have a doctor's note, like we discussed.
Yeah.
Expect that, and it's absolutely mandatory that they work with the employee. And not a lot of employees know this. They think, okay, well, I've reported, I've asked for this, my doctor has recommended this, and then that's it. That's not necessarily the case. The company is required to involve you in the process, and it can be an iterative process, so that you have plenty of input available to you. The main thing to remember is, once some people are really afraid of disclosing, just understand, at least in the United States, if the company has more than 15 people in it and you disclose, you now become a protected class, and and they can't retaliate, fire you just based on your self-disclosure.
Hmm.
And I say that in that direct way because oftentimes I do run into people who are at this process because they've already understood that they might get fired.
Yeah. There is a real fear out there of losing their job.
Right.
Um, so for adults who feel shame or frustration about their work struggles, what kind of mindset shift do you encourage?
So I believe we started out talking about rejection
Yeah.
sensitivity dysphoria.
Not many people know about it either.
It's amazing to me that the idea or theory has not spread even harder and faster like a wildfire,
It's not
because
part of the DSM-5.
exactly. But I believe that it is a huge part of the emotional toll
Mm-hmm.
that happens. We end up feeling like everybody's going to reject us or has already rejected us because of our own internalization of experiences in our life.
Yeah.
And as a coach, I stay far away from trying to attempt to be a psychologist. Yes, I have a PsyD, but I'm not a pretend psychologist clinician. I'm a coach. That gives me a lot of freedom to discuss things. And I always work with my clients to say, we're always working from where you are today.
Exactly.
However, to ignore the experiences of your past, if you've been managing ADHD all your life, is probably an absolute path to destruction, because the reality is, we've heard all our lives. This is a very funny side. When I'm coaching, I always start in the first conversation. I say there's two words that you cannot use. The first one is goals, and the second one is potential.
I love it. I say should, could, would
Exactly.
are not allowed.
Exactly. Exactly. Should's a horrible one. But goals, because I believe that there's a very set forth path to reach goals that has been communicated to the neuronormative
Mm-hmm.
population
Mm-hmm.
that we try to adopt. And if we were like that, if we were, the thing about being diagnosed with ADHD is not to suddenly try to be neuronormative.
No.
It's understanding how you're not
Yeah.
and then making the best of understanding your own behavior in the neurodivergent world. So the other word, um, well, we can get back to that in a moment, but potential. Yeah, okay, potential. So the reason I don't like potential is because for my experience, that was always used as a whipping tool.
Yeah, it
You're
still
not
is,
reaching
John.
your potential.
It still is. I hear it from parents talking about their kids.
Right. I believe Dr. Dodson said that by the time we're 9 years old or 10 years old, if we have ADHD, we've probably heard 100,000 times
So much trauma.
how 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 we're not reaching our potential, how we're not
Yeah.
doing things the right way, how
Yeah.
we're never going to achieve the goals.
Yeah.
And so that part of it is very important to handle because that will severely alter your workplace behavior. Unfortunately, if you're living in constant fear at work, it can be a problem.
Yeah.
And if you want to self-diagnose, you have to overcome that belief that you're not good enough because you are good enough.
Hmm.
If you're working and you are, especially if you're thriving in the company, and oftentimes what happens with ADHD, I think we're very positively aggressive. We usually want to get in there. We have a lot of ideas. We're enthusiastic about the new job, and we find ourselves volunteering and rising really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
The meltdown, the burnout that you talked about was as we transition into now a leadership situation, which often happens. Now you're like, you're now that, do I belong here? So you have a little imposter syndrome.
Yep.
And then you mix that with the RSD,
Mhm.
and suddenly you become the worst leader possible. Because in that middle leadership role, you have to manage both sides. You're managing down, but you have to manage up as well. And therefore, you have to be confident in your ideas. And generally, your ideas have been great. They've gotten you this far. But you also have to understand I'm the in a team. If a company wants to build out a new department or a new project, I want to be on that team and I want to be in the front of that team. I want to come up with the creative ideas. I want to talk about what the end's going to look like. That's my personal place on the team. I do not want to be the statistician, right? I don't want to be the analyst, generally speaking. And I don't want to be the whole team having the role where the whole team ends up waiting for me to complete something in order to finish.
Yeah.
Because by the time we get to the finish, I'm probably looking at a new shiny bauble somewhere else. And I'm not likely to finish. But see how we can joke and laugh about that and lighthearted? It's because we know we've experienced it and we understand that we don't have to be in that, stuck in that.
No.
And I think that's the message to get out for employees who are struggling with ADHD and kind of what to do with it and their understanding of it. I've seen companies pay for coaching.
Yeah.
They'll have a corporate, maybe they weren't aware of ADHD before you brought it to them, but they understand that coaching can really help you because coaching is definitely one of the modalities that's very helpful for people with ADHD. And
Hmm.
they might pay for some limited coaching,
Yeah.
or participate in the cost,
Yeah.
understanding that it's not covered under insurance. Um, they might pay for your gym membership. So after work, you can go and do the exercise that will help you help your mind to be constantly aware of what's going on and getting that hyperactivity out of our system.
Yeah,
We
I
did
need to look
discuss.
at the,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
you need to look on the employee benefits for sure. When starting the job too, even
Right.
before.
So right. That's so once you're aware, then look at the benefits plan. Sometimes things like that aren't going to be addressed in the benefits plan.
Hmm.
And that's where the kind of wellness culture understanding of your company comes in.
Yeah.
But it costs a lot to replace you. And maybe that's the thing that's most important for us to understand. We have a ton of value.
Yes.
If you're suddenly going, well, I'm not as valuable because I have ADHD, you're incorrect. You have a ton of value. And for corporations, the cost to replace you is quite expensive anyway. They'd
Yeah.
rather retain you. So it's threading that middle line between that and working through those understandings of yourself plus the company that then can lead to successful accommodations. My dissertation was on HR from the HR perspective of dealing with accommodations. So the other thing is, like I said, the laws are on your side. You become a protected class, so retaliation should not happen. Obviously, you want to keep your own notes and stuff so that if you think you're being retaliated against, you can prove that later. And there are some lawsuits with actually some substantial awards especially in California. There were two big ones here in California where the employees were awarded large settlements because they were in fact retaliated against because they self-disclosed their ADHD and asked for accommodations. And it's quite interesting. One of those is a case of a psychologist working for the state of California.
Mm.
And somehow the state of California didn't want to agree to the accommodations or any accommodation. And then she felt that she was fired because of it and won a quite sizable award. So there are reasons, the carrot and the stick. There are stick reasons for companies to at least listen to you and work with you. And that's important to understand. It's a lot of burden sometimes, but if you've put if you've invested, let's talk about that person, right, who grew through a company. Like I said, you get excited, you move up through the company, now you're in a leadership role, and suddenly some of these executive function issues are really coming up because now you're in a leadership situation. You have to decide what people are doing instead of you being told what to do necessarily. So with that kind of freedom, that's where sometimes there can be deep concern
Yeah.
as a
There's a lot of
person.
juggling. Yeah.
Right. You're doing a lot of juggling. And so all of a sudden, you're looking into it, you find out you have ADHD. But maybe you've been with that company 15 years or 16 years, and you're struggling with whether or not to disclose because for the reasons that we've already talked about,
Yeah.
the self-worth, self-image issues that come up with managing ADHD over a lifetime. Now all of a sudden you're going to the company and because of that you have great concern. But realistically, if you've been with the company that long, they probably really want you to stay. All you have to do perspective wise, we're talking about change of perspective, is understand that you have value. You have great value. And that's why I like the faith-based approach to leadership because I'm always trying to help people understand their value.
Yeah. That's our moral compass. And I think that
Exactly.
too. Hmm.
Exactly. And so I think if you understand that, then you're more willing to work with the company. The company needs to work with you. And although the initial jump into the foray, so to speak, with HR could be a little scary, the reality is if they're wellness based, if they're culturally sensitive, they're going to be there to assist you. But it really helps if you know how to tell them what assistance you need. And then finally, just because I think that whatever accommodation you ask for, I think you also at the same time have to set up a pretty serious review schedule, perhaps weekly, no less than monthly. You want to review whether or not the accommodation is doing what you were hoping it would do. And since the company agreed to it, it's important that you're able to show them, demonstrate how beneficial it is, or quickly pivot. This was a great idea. It didn't quite work out the way I thought it would. Let's try something else, so that they understand you're just as invested as they are in trying to make it work. If everybody's on the same positive move forward, then I find that the clients I work with, at least, have had great success in attaining accommodations and then being perfectly happy in their work setting, or at least as happy as they're going to be.
John, I could not finish this podcast better. This is just a great way to kind of finish the topic. Is there anything else you want our listeners to take away from our conversation?
No, I just really want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about it in my studies and uh, in putting together my writings. In the research, I have found there's almost no research from this point of view.
I agree.
The literature is so minimal when it comes from the point of view of the employee-employer relationship, other than, of course, this is what people who have ADHD are likely to be like at work, which we kind of know those stats. Those stats are very simply, you're going to show up less. You're more likely to be late. You're probably not going to finish projects. So those are the things that are typical, that are reported statistically about employees in the workplace who have ADHD. But there's very little written about what to do about it.
Are you gonna write a book about it?
Maybe. I think I'm there. I think I'm there. I'm done with academic writing. How's that?
No,
And I,
you don't
and
have,
I,
it doesn't have to be academic. It just needs to be
and I
like,
want to get the story out there. And I was thinking about it the other day, and I was thinking, the neat thing about writing a book is I can use my voice in the book.
yes.
Which of course in academic writing, that is not the desire at all. That's, in fact, when you do a dissertation, we this person that I was talking about, he said, no matter what you do, don't do a dissertation about your work. He goes, because it's so hard to get your voice out of that. You're always going to have anecdotal stories that you want to bring in and all that stuff. And as we used to say, save it for the book. So I guess I've saved some stories for the book. I'm ready to move from the dissertation to the book about employees in the workplace and all workplace ADHD conversations.
With that note, I think you're going to have many readers. Thank you, John, for being here today.
Thank you so much, Maya, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. It was a fantastic episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Apple Podcast and on Spotify. Take care. Bye bye.